welcome to Inside the Artist Studio, where, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. We have Adrienne Stein, and we get a nice, beautiful look into her gorgeous studio, which of course has the most amazing wall color. I'm sitting here trying to figure out what that is because I want to put it somewhere in my own house. It's so beautiful. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Rose. I love that you commented on my wall color because it's directly inspired by one of my favorite artists' studios. He is long dead, but Fredrick Lord Leighton, the English Victorian era painter.
Wow.
Kwong and I visited his home and studio, which is now a museum in London. And his entire house and studio has jewel tones specifically arranged around the theme of teal and gold. So all of the walls of his studio were covered in this teal, lots of mosaics. He was very inspired by like the kind of Orientalist craze at that time, Turkish and, Moroccan tile work. But anyway, I always loved this color so much. So I had to do that as my ode to Fredrick Leighton.
Nice. Well, and you know what? It's just so like you are just such a jewel tone painter too. Like your palette is so uniquely yours. And it just makes me really happy whenever I see it. Like I think it's such a unique palette because a lot of artists, especially artists who work in, not that you're a landscape artist, but artists who work in figurative or landscape, there's just so much that they say with muted tones, and you're like, step aside.
Yes, I cannot resist the full chroma.
Yeah.
Thank you for appreciating it.
Oh, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And you know what? I think like I was having this conversation with an artist who was also a very accomplished musician and music producer. And we were talking about the sound vibrations and the vibrations of color and how those vibrations are intertwined. And
Yes.
I had no idea, but it was just so fascinating because once he started talking about it, I'm like, well, that makes sense as to why, a person would respond to certain paintings and chromas in a different way, because you are picking up on that beautiful harmony that you love inside of you.
Yes, I think you're right. I think every person, everything is frequency in the world. If you want to get really down to it, as new age or woo woo as it might sound, it is really scientific that really everything is kind of vibrating and there's different frequencies going on. And there's different frequencies inside us, and light and color itself is frequency that's perceived physically. And so, yeah, you're right. There's something so subconscious about how we register color and the colors that really call to us.
I think
sometimes,
so.
Yeah, I think so. And sometimes when I choose my models and when I choose what garments and what colors I use to surround my models when I'm planning like figurative compositions, it often has to do with that model's specific, the color that I see them as. And I've never literally seen auras. There are people who claim that,
right?
But to me, it's just like something that I register in their soul and persona. So that's always something that goes into consideration when I'm planning a painting too, especially with a model.
Oh, I love that. I didn't know that, but now it just makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Hey, so okay, this is going to be kind of one of my little I had you guys over for dinner over the summer when you were in Denver, and I know everyone's so jealous right now with the most adorable Liam. But I remember Kwong was saying, so your hubby Kwong was saying that you started selling portraits when were you a teenager?
Yes, and even before that. So I was fortunate to have an early start as an artist, and that's one of the things that was one of the enormous wonderful advantages that I've enjoyed in my life was that I knew I only had one thing that I was even remotely good at when I was young, and it was drawing and painting. And that was really the one thing that I always had just a razor sharp focus when I was drawing and painting from the time I was a child. And it was the only thing which I showed a natural aptitude for. And so, I was really fortunate to be born. My parents aren't artists. My mom is an interior designer, but and has since become a painter, and she's very, very creative. But there were no professional artists that, my parents weren't professional artists, but they were incredibly supportive. And so I was very blessed to have a wonderfully supportive family that encouraged me to pursue it from the time I was really young. So I had a mentor that taught me all the fundamentals of drawing and painting from observation. I had like an atelier style training, which just means that I started studying in the classical tradition, drawing and painting from observation, learning how to paint exclusively from life, that kind of thing. From the time I started studying with my mentor in his studio when I was 11 years old. And I stopped studying with him when I was 18 and moved to California to go to art school. So I just I had this wonderfully rigorous academic, capital A academic training from the time I was young. So I took on my first portrait commission when I was maybe 12 years old, and that was my business. That all through my teens, my summers, all my friends were at the pool while I was at home in my studio working on portrait
Slaving
commissions.
away, child labor.
Yeah, basically. So that was it. Really, art has consumed my life from the time I was a child. And so I always tell people my story is really quite boring, because I'm not one of those people that had this circuitous route to art. I didn't try all kinds of other cool things or go to school for something else. I really just had a singular path towards art. So, and I knew from the time I was young too, I experimented with a lot of different media, but I just always loved oil painting. I always wanted to be an oil painter. And, when I was a child, I was addicted to Disney movies. Of course, like every child growing up in the early 90s, it was The Little Mermaid and The Lion King and Aladdin that first ignited my imagination. And my first dream was to be a Disney animator. And then I learned how to oil paint. I was 11, 12 years old, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is, there's something so luscious about oil painting and the rich history of oil painting. And I just really, it's just been an abiding love that has never left me. And so it was always clear to me that my path was oil painting. And I've experimented with other media, but it's always just what has sustained my loving attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so figuration portraiture was really where you started.
Yes.
And so I want you to do a screen share with us, but I also want you to talk about I have this sense, not being a painter myself, but I have this sense that wherever you are, whatever genre you paint in, that where you position yourself in the world, wherever you are, the atmosphere and the land and the people and whatever politics, whatever is going into that space that you're in is going to influence what comes out on the canvas. And I feel like with your work, that has actually really happened when you're out here spending time in Colorado. Am I right on that?
Yes, absolutely. The West has influenced my work in not just the visual language of the things that I'm depicting in the paintings, but the colors too, and the space. I know, Rose, I was having a conversation with you before just about how spatially, when I started, my exposure to Colorado really started when I started dating my husband, Kwang Ho. And so when I started spending significant amounts of time in the West, I started noticing how spatially different, not just the colors, because, I grew up in Pennsylvania where there's kind of a hazy atmosphere all over everything. So you get these, atmospheric effects that affect the colors of what you're seeing. But then also everything is really close range. There's a lot of foliage. It's very lush. You don't get those 1,000-mile views like you do in Colorado and other locations in the West. So, the visuality of my paintings is a little shallow, as far as like I always have a lot of things going on right here in the foreground and not a lot of like deep space. And so, there's a couple paintings that I have been working on that feel a little more spatial and kind of involve like that vast feeling of the West. So, I'll do a screen share so I can talk a little bit about that as well. So there's a variety of things on my website now. Let me go ahead and see if I can do that.
And as you're working on that, I love the painting that's behind you. And I hadn't really thought about the sort of the foreshortened and how we're right into, like our heads are in your flowers and but that,
Right.
people in the West, and I would count myself among those who, when I go to the East, I get a sort of, after a while, feeling claustrophobic.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so we are looking at a painting called Guardian, and this one I think is what you were talking about, kind of transplanting yourself in the West and letting it work on you. And tell us about this painting. I mean, this is just so stunning.
Thank you so much, Rose. Yes, this is the bison skull in the painting was actually one that I saw. It was on display at the Woolarak Museum in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and I just loved this form. And I was thinking about for this series of work that I was talking to you about that was inspired by the American West. I was also thinking about bones, and I really love bones as sculptural forms, and I love painting them. And of course, there's a tradition in the West of painting bones with Georgia O'Keeffe and some of the skulls that she has painted as well. So yeah, it was a really fun way. I always kind of think about this documentary by the German filmmaker Werner Herzog. It's about a cave in southern France that had been sealed off for 30,000 years, but the documentary is called Cave of Forgotten Dreams.
Oh.
And it's filled with cave paintings, but it's also filled with other evidence of some of the earliest forms of what would be considered worship.
Yes.
So these are bones that are piled up in ways that seem intentional to mark something or to create a space that's kind of set apart from other spaces. So it was kind of assumed that this might have been a ritual space, but anyway, I was thinking about this bone, this skull sort of having this protector, guardian, sort of shamanistic role in the night. And so I just imagined this skull kind of isolated against the night sky, but of course I can't just leave it an empty night sky. It has to be populated with Colorado wildflowers. So of course there's Indian paintbrush and thistles and a bunch of other flowers that I had used photo references that I took just in hikes around Denver, around Colorado. So these are, again, it's not just the landscape, but the very particular flora and fauna of Colorado that has been influencing me.
Yeah.
And we can look at the painting that comes before it as well, if you want that. Yep, there you go. And
yes. Oh,
yes. So this one is called Flight, and it's inspired by the same impetus that inspired the other one, just thinking about forms, arranging forms in a way that takes them outside the context of still life and, just floating them against a dark sky, or, having them arranged in such a way that they're defying gravity. And this, the pheasant pelt was one that Kwong had around from just a pheasant hunting trip that he had gone on. And the colors and the patterns and textures on that pheasant pelt just incredibly beautiful, and I wanted an opportunity to paint it, but to kind of take it out of a context that you might normally see it in, and arrange it that way so that you're almost contemplating these forms like you're seeing them for the first time. And putting the mandibles there at the bottom like that, to me, I set this up as a still life on the floor, and I painted it from life. So I was standing above it, standing at my easel, looking down on it from above. And when I arranged the mandibles like that, they looked like wings to me. So this painting is called Flight. And then all the the dried rose petals that are all around it are sort of floating in this circular mandala around the skull. So I wanted it to kind of have an Eastern feel too, like a mandala.
yeah. And you just really, I mean, in my mind, now you're opening up spaces too in these paintings. This one is sold. So for anybody watching this, no, you can't have it. But, but yeah, I mean, I think this to me is where you and your artistry and just incredibly vivid imagination sings,
Mm,
in taking sort of this, catacomb concept of, and having been in numerous catacombs, um, I'm always fascinated by them, but I'm also fascinated by the people standing next to me, how they react to these hundreds and hundreds of years of bones stacked upon bones, and bones used to almost decorate a space. And
gosh, yes.
yeah, I think it brings out a lot in people of their own thoughts about death and what happens when we die, and is something sacrilegious, or is this the ultimate form of honor,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's wow. Thank you for that association, Rose. That was really awesome that you brought that up, because one of the most profound experiences that I've had in my recent memory is going to the catacombs in Paris for the first time. And you're right, it's like these ossuaries that are monuments to the dead, and they're hallowed spaces, but they're also like baroque and crazy and outrageous. And I found myself asking, how would I feel if my remains became a part of this city of bones and this monument? How it's just
Yeah.
kind of an amazing thing to think about. But I love that you brought up the catacombs. Actually, you could stop on the painting too of the deer antlers. I mean, yes, that one is uh, inspired by a similar thing, although these are all kind of locally foraged objects, because
Oh,
all of it's not quite so Western, but the ferns, the ostrich feather ferns, were all clipped from our yard in Pennsylvania. We have a pretty extensive garden, so all of the peonies are from our garden in
mm,
Pennsylvania, and the azaleas and the roses also are. And there's some Queen Anne's lace, and then the big hibiscus at the top I clipped off of our hibiscus bush. So it's all things that came from our our garden. We have 3 acres, and it's all heavily landscaped, because the former owner of our home had been a master gardener. So
oh, wow.
we have her incredible creation at our disposal. We can't take any credit for it. She was an artist and a painter as well. So we get to paint, the things that she left behind for us. And the deer skulls too, the little fawn skull at the bottom, Kwong and I found on a walk in the woods behind our house. And the other 2 skulls were given to me by friends who either found them on hikes, or one, I think that the one at the buck at the top was from a hunter friend of ours. So these are all just like from my collection. But to me, it kind of reminded me of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. There's something about this. The painting is called Legacy. And I was thinking, wow, how interesting to have these three ages of man sort
Oh,
of thing going on, with the successive
oh,
cascading skulls getting smaller as they go down, and sort of the morbid quality of the bones, along with the lush quality of the flowers. And so I really have a fun time juxtaposing those things visually, and also just like setting them up on my floor.
yeah. Okay, so first of all, I was thinking when you were saying that the place you bought had this garden, and the artist who created the garden, you know, I I would think, as like I love to garden. I now live in a condo, so I just have potted plants, but when I was gardening, every season was a new thing, and I was constantly digging things up and as you were saying that, I thought, what an honor to a person who put her heart and soul into it, that the two of you come in and not only maintain it, but you make these gorgeous paintings from
Thank you. I
things.
I appreciate that. Thanks for that, Rose. And I think that's really true. And I mean, I believe in the spirit world and the unseen, and all those things. And I feel like this is her it was her gift to us before she even knew us, and it feels like it's, in a way, it keeps her memory alive, and I see it as part of her legacy that we get to paint these things. And she herself was an artist, and we never got to meet her because she was in the advanced stages of dementia when we bought
Oh,
her home, and she was
oh,
living in an assisted living facility. But you know, it was, and she passed away shortly
mm,
after we bought this home. But and our home was built in 1764,
oh,
so it's older than America, and it was built by German immigrants in the 1700s. So it's really interesting how the place where we live, I feel like a home sort of wants. It feels like our home just wants artists in it, and this home, actually, it's a whole other side story, but it's about 5 miles from where I grew up.
oh,
And as a child, my parents would always take us on Sunday afternoon drives. It was kind of a ritual. I'm the oldest of 4 children, so it was always a ritual for our family. And so we would go through different rural areas in our county. And I always remember my parents driving us through this area, and I had admired this house since I was a child.
wow.
Um, and now, here I am. So
Oh,
it is kind of amazing how these things happen. And I would never underestimate or not talk about the difficulties of living in an old house. I mean, there
yeah,
is no insulation in this home. It's horsehair plaster on top of limestone. That's it. It's winters are cold,
wow.
but it really is. It's really enchanting, and it has added just an incredible dimension to our lives as artists. And so anyway, yes, there's definitely a botanical element in these, and we can also talk about the caribou antlers here with the thunderhead, if you want to click
Yes.
on that one, which is also relevant to the piece that I'm creating for contemporary realism now, just as a little sneak preview.
So we're not getting this one. This one's sold too. You know what? And I just want to put in a little, note to, apologies for putting paintings in front of you that you can't have. But Adrienne is a contemplative painter and is just not the fastest painter. But then also is shepherding Liam,
Yes.
along with Kwong. So there's some time constraints. But anyway, so
Yeah.
talk to us about this painting and then how you're evolving this for the next painting that we're going to be getting.
Yes. This painting is called Arc, ARC, and there's I like titles sometimes when they can be like a double entendre or have like a layered meaning.
Mhm.
And I I had been at the Museum of Natural History in New York with Kwong, and I was looking at all the different displays of different regions in America, in North America, and they had a display of caribou. And there was a display where the caribou, this taxidermied enormous caribou, was leaning down eating, and its antlers were right out in front of you like this, and it looked like lungs to me. I mean, it was like
Mm,
something about that form just it electrified me when I saw it, and I thought I have to paint these antlers, and it can't be a painting of a caribou. It just has to be these antlers,
yeah.
and it has to feel numinous, and it has to feel like lungs, like the way I experienced that form. And so yeah, this painting's called Arc because of the obvious shape form that it makes, but also like the Ark of the Covenant. It kind of has this spiritual overtone to it that I thought was interesting. And so yeah, the Thunderhead, I started seeing, a lot of cloud formations like this. I would always devour when I would see cloud formations like this in Pennsylvania after a storm. Every now and then you'd see them, but in Colorado, they're a daily occurrence.
Yeah.
You see these extreme cloud formations at dusk, and the way that they're lit by the last rays of sun of the day, it's so dramatic and beautiful. So I wanted to just, you get this sense of an awe-inspiring, almost like a mushroom cloud feeling of like this gorgeous, powerful thunderhead. and
Yes.
then and I originally did not have the hollyhocks in the center.
Oh,
It was just the caribou antlers in front of the thunderhead, and I was like 3/4 of the way done with this painting. And I'm, like you said, I'm a slow painter, so I was like celebrating being done, slaving over this painting. And I was laying there in bed one night thinking, there's just there's just something missing. Something needs to soften this. You need something to contemplate in the middle of those antlers, because there's just, this just feels a little bit too empty for me. And so I had visited the Denver Botanic Gardens the week before, and the Denver Botanic Gardens has some really amazing hollyhocks over the summer in every different color. And I thought, it's the hollyhocks that need to be there. so
Ah,
so I took a leap of faith, and Pong was like, what are you doing? It looks beautiful. But I was like, it really just didn't feel complete until I spent an extra week or two painting those hollyhocks and getting them to feel right in that space. And, when you're making it up, you don't, you want the lighting to feel right. You want them to feel backlit enough, but you want to be able to see what they look like. So yeah, it was a lot of like making things up on the fly. So yeah, there's always when I go into a painting, there's always an overarching visual concept, but as I go, the painting kind of tells me what it needs in a way. And so as I go, I sort of adapt things and sometimes surprise myself a little bit.
This painting, it's so funny. I guess when I first saw this, had made the assumption this was how you put this together from the start. But so it's interesting because when I saw this painting, and I'm just now kind of putting words to what it felt inside of me, was that it felt like, yes, there's hope.
I love that.
Like here are these antlers that were either shed naturally or from an elk who is killed,
Yes.
and then this thundercloud that could be foreboding, it could be moving off or coming forward, you don't know. And then
Yes.
rising up through, the strongest thing in here, to me, is the vibrancy of that hollyhock, and how, when you watch hollyhocks go up, boy, they just keep going and going. And they're for a big, tall plant, they're so rooted and they're so sturdy. And it's like,
Yes.
oh yes, nature is going to survive all of this.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's really amazing, isn't it, when you see flowers coming up, through just, Kwong and I were looking at, I can't remember what it was, but we were walking around, and we had put down weed barrier and tarp over a certain area, but things were like pushing through
Yeah.
and coming out from under, and we were like, wow, life is so persistent. It just wants to be. And these flowers, hollyhocks too, because they're so towering and
Yeah.
majestic. And I've tried to grow them in Pennsylvania many times, but they don't like Pennsylvania. They don't do as well here in the West. You see them all over the place because they just like that full sun, very consistent sunlight.
Yeah. And I think they like it a little drier. I could be wrong, but I think,
Yes,
it's probably too,
that's right.
yeah, it's not hard enough for them to get through.
That's exactly right. They like a little bit of drought.
Yeah. So you have been really busy this
Yes.
past year. You and Kwong had a show together. You also had a residency, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for asking about that. We had Kwong and I were the 2023 artists in residence at the Ladue Topiary Gardens
Mm.
in Moncton, Maryland. So Harvey Ladue was he was a wealthy man who he was a bachelor his whole life, and he just had this incredible. He bought this old manor house in Maryland and on many acres of land, and he was a topiary enthusiast. He planted and shaped his own topiaries, and he was an avid gardener, and he raised horses, and he was a fox hunter, and I don't know, many things. But his estate has become a public botanic garden,
Oh.
and it's a beautiful place. And there are incredible koi ponds and lily ponds, and I mean, it's sprawling, and it's kind of in an obscure location, and I had actually never heard of it. It's about 45 minutes south of where Kwong and I live in Pennsylvania. And so we were invited to be the artist in residence, which means we were given full access to the gardens at any time, even when it's closed. So we weren't living there, but since we lived close enough, we could come there to paint on site and take photo references. And then at the end of the season, at the end of September, we were given a show in Harvey Ledoux's barn where he raised his horses. They turned into this beautiful gallery.
Oh.
So we got to, really just focus on this beautiful garden all throughout the year, and so it allowed me to focus on painting botanical inspired things all throughout the year, which was really fun and exciting. So you can kind of see that. And even though a lot of my focus kind of for the last, I would say the last 10 years has been on figures that have a fantasy, magical, realist feel about them. It's been really fun just focusing on flowers and light coming through petals, and yeah, really just being given a full permission slip to explore
Yeah.
that exclusively.
Well, and let the flowers be their own figure studies.
That's
And
right. That's
yeah,
right. Let flowers be their own figures. That's perfectly said. Yep.
yeah. So I want to ask you, I think at the top here on
Yeah.
your website, I see that somebody's child is making a starring
Yes.
role.
Absolutely. He's the first thing on my website. It's this painting I did to commemorate our son Liam's first year of life. He's 2.5 now, and I started this painting the week that he turned 1. And I worked on it in stolen moments throughout the year until he turned 2. And
Oh,
now that he's 2.5, I'm planning on doing another painting to commemorate year 2 of his life.
wow.
But I've always loved, I mean, I've always loved Madonna and child imagery, and always loved that aspect of the maternal, sacred feminine. And so I wanted to do a self-portrait. I've always loved all of these Renaissance Madonnas, and the one thing that they all have in common is that they were painted by men.
Yeah.
And so I thought, having experienced motherhood firsthand, I wanted to explore this with a tenderness and an insight that, as a mother now myself, because I've painted other Madonna and child paintings of friends of mine and people that
Mm.
I know. I thought, wow, how exciting to get to explore this um, personally as a self-portrait. So
Wow.
my Liam, when I asked Kwong to do the photo shoot for me for all of my photo references, and so as I was holding him, he reached his hand up like this and did the traditional hand of blessing, like in late medieval, early Renaissance paintings. And I said, there we go. It's meant
That's
to
it.
be. This is how I have to paint him.
Oh my God.
So yeah, it's kind of like in that tradition, in that lineage, but casting myself and Liam as the Madonna and child. So, and
Mm.
also, the Siberian irises in the
Oh.
painting. Those are those little mini irises that are in the painting. Those we have those growing in our garden that Yvonne, the former owner of our home, had planted, and they're just so delightful. I had actually never seen them until we bought our house, and when they came up the first spring, I couldn't believe it. They're just really, really beautiful. And the persimmons, it's just kind of interesting the way the imagery kind of evolves. But I had wanted to paint persimmons above us, and I didn't. I didn't know anyone who had a persimmon tree, and I was looking at all these persimmons on the internet, and I was like, how am I going to do this? I can't really make this up. I don't. And Kwong and I were out for a drive in the country one day, and I was just kind of frustrated. We both needed a break to get away. We were driving through Lancaster Amish country, and in the middle of a field we're driving by, and there's a persimmon tree standing there with full persimmons
Oh.
on it and everything. And I said,
Oh.
stop. So he pulled off to the shoulder on this little country road, and I went and photographed it, and that's what I used for my painting. So I always kind of feel like, the painting, I start with an idea and it evolves. And the thunderheads in the painting behind me are actually kind of just also inspired by the painting that I had done, that I just showed you, that we just talked about
Yeah.
with the caribou antlers, painting a sky like that with the thunderhead. So yeah, the paint a painting can, I always kind of start with a general idea, and then as I start moving through the painting, I start to get other ideas and adding to it a little bit. So it always ends up a little different than what I had in mind.
Wow. Adrienne, so I'm looking at this painting on so many different levels, and so many things are calling out to me, that the beautiful harmony of it, the harmony of you holding Liam, and then just the mother and the, you know, and that sensitivity. And I'm not surprised that he held out his hand like that, but but still I thought, okay, when I first saw that, I'm like, oh, this is a little wink to, you know,
Yes.
art history, but of course Liam is going to play
Yeah. And Rose, since you are the mother of two boys, you know that they go through an angelic phase right before they learn to walk. I
Yes.
started this painting and got it well underway right before Liam learned to walk. And now I'm like, whoa, how would I depict him now that he runs away from me when I try to put his shoes on, when he throws things at me, when I tell him that he has to go to bed.
Oh,
It's like the journey of motherhood. Every phase, you know, they're precious in a different way, but there's different challenges at every time. But really, like the infant stage, as challenging as it was in its own way, it was like it really was such a sacred time. And when
oh,
people tell you when your baby is young, as I'm sure you remember from your two boys, you know, people tell you, oh, cherish these times because there's going to come a time when you will wish that you had them back. And you think, yeah, right. And
yeah,
sure enough, a year
yeah.
and a half later, you think, oh, what I wouldn't give.
Oh, it's so, you know, yeah. And honestly, the part where I'm super jealous is that you have the ability to create a portrait with your son, and you know, keep him in that, because you know photos are fine, but
Yes.
I mean this is amazing because you know those irises and that purple set against that green, that's exactly, I mean these are really deep rich jewel tone colors, and then you've got this beautiful sky that seems to sort of cross boundaries of all the places that you live and
Yes.
visit. And then those persimmons, you know, the last time I saw a persimmon tree was actually in California. You know, I think they need a
Wow.
certain climate, right? And
Yeah, they're rare around here.
yeah, but it
Mhm.
also is, I mean, you know, when you think back to your art history lessons, you know, having just ripe fruit and a mother
Yeah.
and child, and it's just this forever kind of beauty and joy of life.
Thank,
And oh my gosh, cherish, you know, really cherish this.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah,
Rose. I so appreciate that. I know, you know, my tendency is always when if I have the opportunity to idealize, I'm going to idealize, you know. I
yeah.
want lush beauty. It's the kind of beauty that I long for. And I think yeah, there are just some things in life that have that beautiful sacredness, like you said, just
Mhm.
that that you know lushness of the fullness of life. And I choose to look at that, and I choose to celebrate that through my work.
Wow. That's so perfectly said, perfectly stated. Hey, so okay, I hate to stop, but I'm gonna stop because we're gonna see you, I hope, in January for the show. I hope.
Perhaps.
I hope. You know, you have a place to stay.
Thank
Um,
you, Rose.
yes. And then, but you have a one-woman show coming up in Denver in the summer, I think.
Yes. Yes, that's right. In the last week of July, we haven't chosen an exact date for the opening, but it will be the last week of July.
Okay, and so we are going to host a dinner with you. So yes, so in July, early August, we're going to have dinner with Adrienne, and so mark it on your calendar soon, or watch the website on the ArtSol, because we're going to pick that date, and we're going to pair you with a chef who is going to respond. This is going to be spectacular, I'm sure. They're going to respond to your work with food. And yes, and
I
I've
cannot
just,
wait.
oh my God, I've just added another piece to this Dinner with Artists puzzle. There is a wonderful radio station that we are now teaming up with, and they are going to broadcast dinner live.
How
Um,
exciting.
I know. And so they also pair us with a sommelier who will pair the wine with the art and the food. And wow.
How How exciting. Oh my gosh, Rose. Well,
Yeah.
this brainchild that you have dreamed up is just hitting the ground running, and I couldn't be more excited for you. It's just a wonderfully creative way to engage people in new ways with artists and their like personal
Mhm.
inner lives. And yeah, I just think it's beautiful. I just think it's an amazing opportunity. Plus, as artists, to get to connect with people about our work, to get to share our stories, and then also to see how chefs interpret our work. And
Yeah.
who doesn't want to eat an incredible plate of gorgeous food that
Oh my God,
has been
right?
dreamed up just for that specific event? So
God, and the
I'm just,
wine and yeah.
yes. Oh, I'm just in awe of your creativity. Thank you so much for originating this.
Oh, well, I'm very excited for this. And so we're gonna get everything on the calendar here in the next couple months. And anyway, go to the ArtSol to check out our schedule, adriennestein.com, for all of these wonderful images. And of course, see them in person in January at Gallery 1261. Adrienne, I just can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day. And I know you've got to run to something else now, but I so appreciate you and just love this chat as always.
Thank you, Rose. I so appreciate it.
Take good care.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.